All right, let's jump right in. We're tackling a big topic today, one that gets a lot of people talking: women in Islam. And we're going to do it by going straight to the source.
So, where do you even begin? Well, usually it all comes down to this one central question. Is Islam fair to women? It's a big question, right? And to have any chance of answering it, we have to look at what the foundational texts actually say.
Now, when people ask that question, they're usually thinking about a few key things: marriage, money, personal rights, that sort of thing. So that's what we'll do. We're going to skip the generalizations and dive right into the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet to see what's actually there. Okay, first up, financial rights and independence. This is a huge one, something that affects daily life in a really practical way. Okay, so check this out, because it's a total flip of what many people expect. You hear the word dowry, and you probably think of the bride's family paying the groom's family, right? Well, in Islam, it's the complete opposite. The groom has to give a mandatory gift directly to the bride. And this gift even has a special name. It's called the mahr. And listen, this isn't just some token gesture. It is a mandatory financial gift that belongs 100% to her. It's her money, her property. She can do whatever she wants with it: save it, invest it, spend it. The whole idea is to give her financial security from the very first day of the marriage. And this isn't just some cultural thing that developed over time. No, it's right there in the scripture. The Quran itself says to give the women their dowries graciously. That word graciously is so important. It's not supposed to be like a business deal. It's meant to be a gift of honor, given freely. Okay, so that's her financial standing at the start of a marriage. But what about before that? What about her rights within her own family? That brings us to inheritance. You have to understand, this next part was absolutely revolutionary for its time. We're talking 7th century Arabia, where women were often considered property and inherited, well, nothing. And then the Quran comes along and says point blank, for women is a share of what parents and relatives leave. It legally mandated it. So this wasn't a modern idea. This right was established for women over 14 centuries ago. All right, let's shift gears. We're moving into our next section, and this one gets into some of the most misunderstood and, frankly, controversial verses in the whole conversation, the ones about marriage.
There's this one verse in particular, Quran 4:34, that people always bring up. But when you look at how scholars break it down, it's not a green light for abuse. It's actually laid out as a 3-step process for de-escalating a really serious conflict. You start with talking it out, then you move to separating beds. It's about creating space. And only then is there a final step mentioned as a last resort.
But here's the thing, and this is maybe the most important rule of all. You can't just take a verse in isolation. You have to see how it was lived out by the person who brought the message, the Prophet Muhammad. His personal example is the ultimate instruction manual. And this next part just seals it. It's a statement from his wife, Aisha, the person who knew him better than anyone. She said flat out, "The messenger of Allah never struck a woman or a servant. Never." So his own life is the clearest possible statement against domestic violence, full stop. And he didn't just live it, he taught it. He created a new standard for what it means to be a good man. He literally said, the best of you are those who are best to their wives. So the ultimate test of a man's character is how he treats his family. Okay, let's tackle another big one: polygamy. So is it true that the Quran permits a man to marry more than one wife? Yes, the permission is there, but, and this is a huge but, it comes with a massive condition attached. It says if you fear that you cannot be perfectly just and fair to them, then you must marry only one. It's not a free-for-all. It's a permission with a very, very high bar. And what's really fascinating is that the Quran seems to comment on its own rule later on. Another verse says, "You will never be able to be perfectly just between wives, no matter how much you try." So many scholars look at that and say, see, the text itself is pointing out that the condition is basically impossible to meet, suggesting that monogamy is the real ideal here. So that leads us perfectly into our next section, which is all about personal choice and consent. This is a big one. Let's make this crystal clear. In Islamic law, consent isn't just a nice idea. It's a non-negotiable requirement. A marriage without the full, free consent of both people is straight up invalid. It doesn't count.
And again, this comes directly from the Prophet's teachings. He said a woman's permission must be sought. He didn't say, inform her. He said, get her permission. He essentially gave women veto power over who they marry, which was a huge affirmation of their right to choose.
Now, let's talk about modesty. It's a topic that's almost always associated with women's clothing, right? But what's so interesting is that in the Qur'an, the instruction for modesty is actually given to men first. It tells men to lower their gaze and be modest before it says anything to women. That tells you the principle is for everyone, not just one gender.
Okay, all of this, it brings us to what might be the single most important takeaway from this whole discussion. If you get this one point, everything else starts to make a lot more sense.
And it's this, the crucial difference between the source and the culture. The ideals, the teachings, they come from the Quran and the Prophet's example. But culture, that's what people do with those teachings. It's human interpretation, and humans are, well, human. They're not perfect. So what people do and what the text says are not always the same thing. And just like any group of people, sometimes Muslims don't live up to their own ideals.
So when you cut through all the noise, all the cultural practices and politics, and you go straight back to the original texts, a very clear picture emerges. Over and over again, you see this emphasis on justice, on dignity, on respect, and on financial independence for women.
And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. How does knowing the difference between a principle and a practice, between an ideal and reality, change the way we look at any faith, or any culture, for that matter?